You've seen this before. Two people disagree. One gets louder. They bring more examples, more logic, more emotion. They push harder. And the other person, they don't raise their voice. They don't rush to defend themselves. Sometimes they barely respond at all. And strangely, they're the one people end up agreeing with. Not immediately, but later, hours later, days later. The room slowly shifts toward them. Here's what most people misunderstand. Winning an argument is not about defeating a person. It's about shaping how their mind processes you after the conversation ends. And arguments rarely change minds, but presence does. Why arguments almost never work. When most people feel challenged, their brain interprets it as a threat, not a logical threat, a social threat. Your brain is wired to protect your identity. Your beliefs are part of that identity. So when someone pushes against your belief, your brain doesn't calmly evaluate evidence. It defends. Your heart rate rises. Your attention narrows. You stop listening and start preparing responses. You felt this. You're not trying to understand anymore. You're trying to win. And the moment that happens, learning stops. This is why arguments fail. Not because logic is weak, because the human brain under pressure cannot process opposing information objectively. The louder the conversation becomes, the less thinking actually happens. What quiet people understand, people who always win disagreements, understand something subtle. You cannot persuade a defensive mind. A defensive mind only protects itself. So instead of increasing pressure, they remove pressure. They don't interrupt. They don't correct every point. They don't chase the last word. And this does something powerful. It keeps the other person's brain out of defense mode. Because persuasion does not happen during a debate. It happens during reflection, long after the conversation ends. The reactance effect. Think about the last time someone argued aggressively with you. Did it make you reconsider your position, or did it make you more certain you were right? Most people don't change their beliefs when pushed. They reinforce them. This is called psychological reactance. When humans feel their autonomy is threatened, they instinctively resist, even if the other person is correct. Pressure creates resistance. Calm creates consideration. The quiet person in a disagreement is not passive. They are creating mental space, and space allows thinking. Why questions are more powerful than statements. There's another reason they don't argue. Arguments are about ego. Understanding is about curiosity. The moment a conversation becomes about proving yourself, you stop trying to understand the other person, and the other person senses that immediately. When someone feels understood, their brain relaxes, and a relaxed brain becomes flexible. This is why the person who asks questions often has more influence than the person who delivers statements. Because questions don't attack identity, they invite reflection. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," they ask, "What makes you see it that way?" And suddenly the conversation changes. The other person starts explaining, not defending. Explaining forces the brain to organize its thoughts. And in doing so, people often notice gaps in their own reasoning without being told. No one likes being corrected, but people willingly correct themselves. Influence happens after the conversation. People who don't argue also understand timing. Most conversations are emotionally loaded in the moment, but clarity comes later. After the emotion fades, the brain replays the interaction, and this is where influence happens. If you stayed calm, if you listened, if you didn't humiliate them, their mind returns to your words without emotional resistance. Your point survives. The argument doesn't. The person who tried to dominate the conversation may feel victorious immediately, but their impact disappears quickly. Because people don't reconsider ideas attached to embarrassment, they avoid them. The calm person, however, becomes a safe reference point in memory, so their ideas get revisited. Quiet influence beats loud persuasion. The power of emotional control. There is also a deeper psychological effect. Humans associate emotional control with competence. When someone cannot regulate their reactions, your brain unconsciously lowers their credibility, not because they lack intelligence, because they lack stability. And stability signals reliability. The person who stays composed during disagreement communicates, "I am not threatened by opposing views." This makes others take their position more seriously, because confidence without aggression feels trustworthy. Aggression often looks like certainty, but it feels like insecurity. Calm feels like understanding. Why they don't engage in every argument. Another reason they win is simple. They choose what deserves engagement. Most arguments are not about truth. They are about validation. Some people don't want clarity. They want confirmation. If you argue with someone who is seeking validation, you won't change their mind. You will strengthen their attachment to the belief. So people who rarely argue do something different. They disengage strategically, not to avoid the topic, to avoid reinforcing resistance. Silence, in certain moments, is not surrender. It is refusal to participate in an unproductive psychological loop. They conserve their influence for conversations where thinking is possible. The silence effect. You've probably noticed this in real life. Someone explains their view calmly once and stops. No long justifications, no emotional escalation, and strangely, their words stay in your mind. Why? Because the brain continues unfinished conversations internally. When a discussion ends without pressure, your mind keeps processing it privately, and private processing is where belief change actually happens. No audience, no ego defense, just reflection. The person who argues loudly ends the thinking process. The person who speaks calmly begins it. The power of the pause. This is also why they don't rush to respond. Most people react instantly. Immediate reaction signals emotional activation, but a pause signals control. When someone takes a moment before answering, your brain assumes they are considering, not reacting, and consideration increases perceived intelligence and credibility. A short pause changes how your words are received, not because your words changed, because your state did. People trust regulated minds, not reactive ones. Why they don't need the last word. The last word satisfies ego, but influence doesn't require closure. In fact, trying to close the argument often closes the other person's mind, so they let conversations end naturally. No dramatic conclusion, no final statement, and because there was no forced ending, the other person continues thinking afterward. That's where the shift happens. Not during the debate, after it. The real secret. Here's the real secret. People who rarely argue are not trying to win the conversation. They are trying to win the relationship with reality. They care more about being effective than being right in the moment. They understand a simple psychological truth. A mind cannot open while it feels attacked, so they remove the feeling of attack. They lower emotional intensity. They stay steady, and steady people influence slowly but permanently. What you can do. Try one small change. Next time you disagree with someone, don't start with your position. Start with understanding theirs. Ask them to explain. Repeat back what you heard. Then share your thought once, not 5 times, once, and stop. No immediate rebuttal, no defensive tone, no urgency to resolve it. Leave space. It will feel incomplete. That's the point. Because the goal is not to win the moment. The goal is to stay in their mind after the moment ends. And when your words continue living in someone's thoughts, you didn't lose the argument, you changed the outcome.